know who this person is. Just in case you don't know, his name is Sushil Kumar and he was one of the winners of KBC or Kaun Banega Crorepati. The interesting thing is that he won 5 crore rupees. So if you take the after-tax amount that he won, it would come out to be 3.5 crore rupees. So this is the rosy story so far. But the problem in this story is that this person unfortunately went bankrupt. One of the reasons why that happened was that he understood very little how to go about investing his own money. Because imagine this, if he won this amount in 2010-11 around and now it is 2022, that 3.5 crore after-tax money could have been easily turned into 10 crore rupee if he would have done index-based investing. But unfortunately, he was not able to manage his finance, which is a very sad affair. So on this video, I'm going to talk about 10 critical financial lessons that you should know as a salaried class person. It is extremely critical, important, absolutely essential that you understand and write down these lessons because this can prove to be a game changer for your life. So the first critical lesson that you should know is that how fast money loses its buying power. Here is a chart for you and this is for US dollar, and as per this estimate, US dollar has lost approximately 96% of its buying power. Now you'll say that you are showing some weird Western figure, all this stuff. How does it impact me sitting in 2022? Okay, so let us do a thought exercise and you tell me in the comment box, what do you think is the value of 1 crore rupee 15 years from now? So pause the video for 3 seconds and type out your answer. So here are the estimates, and if we assume inflation rate in India to be 7%, which is a reasonable figure, 1 crore rupee in the next 10 years will become 50 lakh rupees. In the next 15 years, it will become 36 lakh rupees. And in the next 20 years, that same 1 crore rupee will become only 25 lakh rupees. The important point is that the goal of investing, many a times what we think is that it is to just grow our money at a crazy rate. Maybe that is true, maybe that is not true. Sometimes the mutual fund managers will show you charts like that, okay, if you compound your wealth at 15% CAGR for a period of 15 years by investing 15,000 rupees monthly, it will become 1 crore. Great, but you also need to understand the flip side of the equation, which is that money loses its power really, really fast. In case you want to understand how did I arrive at these numbers, here is the discount rate formula that you can utilize and plug the numbers and play with it and figure out the real value of 1 crore rupee after a certain number of years. The important message that I want to give out is twofold. Point number one is that it is absolutely critical for you to invest your money, because if you don't invest the money that is just being kept into your savings account will get eaten up by inflation. The second key important point that many of us do not pay emphasis to is that the goal of investing becomes to beat inflation. This is a very important point and let me expand upon it on point number 2. Now most of us do not realize at what rate we need to grow our money. This is the absolute minimum number at which our money should be growing. How do we identify that? In order to understand that, let me set some historic context and talk about the interesting story of Japan. Here is a chart that people keep on talking about that, hey, you know what, if you would have invested in the Japanese stock market, that in the last 30 years it has given almost 0% return. So Japanese stock market is pretty much pointless. What's the point of investing in the Japanese stock market? But this is only half the story. The other half of the story comes from other macroeconomic factors, which are that number one, the inflation in Japan is close to 0%. Also, the interest rate in Japan are close to 0%. Now you'll say that you're speaking about some weird financial mumbo jumbo. How does it impact me as a common citizen? Okay, so here is the story and let me paint you the picture in this way. So imagine that you're 30 years old as a Japanese citizen living in Japan in 1991. You worked really hard for the next 30 years and you saved 1 crore rupee equivalent of Japanese yen. Now, when you put that in the bank, that amount of money will not come down, or rather the buying power of that money will not come down. But run the same example in India, that if you're 30 years old in 1991 in India, and if you would have decided to keep that money in bank, that 1 crore, what would the value of that 1 crore rupee would be after 30 years? Again, use that division formula that I had spoken earlier and give me the answer in the comment box. The important message that I want to drive home through this comparison is not to criticize India, but to tell you the point that in some economies, for example, Indian economy, some African economies which are growing at a faster rate, it becomes equally important for the citizens to grow their money and put their money in slightly riskier assets. But on the flip side, if you look at stagnating economies like Japan, it is completely okay for their citizens not to take risk with their money. They can just literally leave their money in the bank because they know that the buying power of that money is unlikely to come down quite sharply. The third key financial mistake that we make is that we do not buy insurance early. Again, let me put some stats and numbers around it. Right now, if I ask you what is one of the biggest concerns in the macroeconomy, you would say that, hey, inflation. Inflation is really, really high. In US, inflation is crushing the economy. What is the US current inflation? You would say that, hey, it is around 9%. But guess what is the medical inflation in India? It is close to 14%. Now, that is not the bad news. The bad news is the rates at which the premium for medical insurance is going up in India, that is accelerating at a very fast pace. Now, you would be tempted that, okay, you know what, Akshat, this is like, really sad talking about term insurance, life insurance, health insurance, this insurance. I don't want to talk about this. So here is another figure and I will show you the difference in terms of premiums that you pay when you buy term insurance at 25 versus when you are buying term insurance at 35. There is almost a 70% difference between the two. So the point is that the younger you are and when you are buying insurance, you are likely to save more money. So this brings us to the current crisis where a lot of people had to undertake and foot a lot of will in terms of meeting their medical expenses. So please fix that situation first before moving on to investing anywhere. The fourth key mistake that we make is that we don't invest our money in fixed deposits. Now you will smile at me, you will laugh at me, you will post weird comments, but hear me out. The point about fixed deposit is that it is one type of an asset. So the first critical thing that a fixed deposit investment solve for you is that it helps you meet emergencies emergency like situations. So when you are building your emergency fund, at least it should be 6 to 12 times of your monthly income. So that fund can be parked in fixed deposit, or it can be parked in liquid debt funds. The second key utility of fixed deposit is fairly simple, that it helps you explore opportunities. So let me speak about it from my own personal experience, that when in 2020 the stock markets crashed, I had some savings which I took out of FD and deposited that in the stock markets. So these type of situations can help you make crazy amount of money. Again, try to do a thought exercise with me, that who do you think made the most amount of returns in the last 3 years? Those people are who ended up investing a lot of money during the COVID crash, simply because of the fact that the Nifty has given absolutely 0% return in the last 1 year. You can only take advantage of such opportunities if you have some liquid money with you, and that can be saved into FDs. So therefore have little bit of FD investments always to take these opportunistic bets whenever the possibility arises. Another key mistake that we make is that we don't buy non-paper assets. Now what is the meaning of non-paper assets? Basically there are two types of assets. One would be paper assets, this would be cash, this would be fixed deposits, this would be cryptos, these would be stock markets investment. These are all paper investments. What are non-paper investments? Non-paper investments are investments where government has very limited control. For example, if you own property, for example a land, once you own that property, the intervention from the government is likely to be very less. Same happens with gold. If you have physical gold, then the intervention from the government would be very less. Now why am I advocating that some part of your money should be invested in non-paper assets? The answer there is fairly simple, that we don't know to what extent the government is going to do money printing. There is no guarantee that the government is not going to increase the money printing by 100% next year or 200% the year after that. Now you'll say that Akshat, we are talking like mad talks. Who does that? Well, the US government. The increase in money supply between the period 2020 and 2022 in the US has been close to 300%, which indirectly means that if you're sitting on cash, then a lot of that cash will lose its buying power. Therefore, you must prepare for a doomsday scenario, that if all goes haywire, then at least you have some real assets in play, for example gold, for example Bitcoin. I know that I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, but Bitcoin according to me is also a digital property. So these are some of the assets in which you can choose to spread your bets. Again, I'm not pushing you to buy Bitcoin or real estate or any other asset. Just think about paper, non-paper asset and take positions in assets that you choose to believe in. Now the sixth mistake that we make is that we do not know how to take loans, and we don't take loans at all. This is a highly controversial topic, and I know that I'm going to take a lot of heat. In case you want to learn a detailed method of taking loan properly, there is a video that I've done. Please go and watch it. Again, I will link it in the comment box also. You can go and watch. Also, if you have listened to this video so far, do consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video so that these type of videos reach out to more people and make them financially aware. So coming back to the topic of loans, let me use a couple of examples as to where we go wrong in terms of taking loans. So if you are taking a car on loan, that is pretty much a pointless loan. You are not getting any kind of tax benefits, and in majority of the cases, you are much better off buying a car through your savings rather than through a loan. On the flip side, if you are taking a loan in order to buy a house or a property or a land, then it is very likely that you will be able to get some offsetting benefits in the form of tax rebates. So you should consider taking loans for some specific purposes. On the flip side, if I have to give you another example, then the narrative in the market is that, you know what, keep taking loan for every single thing out there. For example, if I'm buying an iPhone, I will take a loan. If I'm buying a car, I will take a loan for that also. If I'm buying a house, I will take a loan for that also. So for 500 things, I will have some kind of loan running on my head. You should not be doing it, because every time you take a loan, it impacts your CIBIL score. So you should be sensible in terms of what type of items you should be taking a loan vis-a-vis not. Ideally, you should consider taking productive loans only. Please do not take unproductive loans, no matter how lucrative it seems to you. For this, please go and check this video. I have shown you a proper way of taking a loan. Hopefully that video would be useful for you. So the seventh point is that we don't understand the concept of cash flow, and neither are we motivated to manage our cash flows well. So very quick understanding, what is the meaning of cash flows? So let us understand through an example. So let's imagine that your monthly salary is really good. You are making 5 lakh rupees monthly. Congratulations. Now cash flow would mean that at the end of the month, you are left with some kind of money, and whatever money is coming in, it is truly coming in for you so that you can use it in some capacity. It should not happen that your monthly salary is 5 lakh rupees, but you have purchased 10 different properties or 20 different properties, and your EMI monthly payment becomes 6 lakh rupees. So what is the cash flow in such a situation? That your salary is 5 lakh, but your EMI payment becomes 6 lakhs because you are over leveraged. Now you would say that, okay, what is the problem in such a scenario? Because all these are investments for me. What is wrong with that? The problem is that when you have negative cash flows, and if for some reason, some kind of emergency comes in your life, then you will have to sell your investments at a very bad time. You must have heard of a concept called as distressed sale in real estate. What does that mean? It simply means that sometimes people have such urgent requirement of money that they sell their properties at half the prices. Why does that happen? It happens because of the cash flow problem. So do understand that never increase your EMI payment more than 30% of the entire amount. Now point number 8 is that sometimes we trust the government too much and we end up investing crazy amount of money in government schemes. I know a lot of people from my family, what they advocate is that, hey, because there is some Sarkari scheme, we will put our money in that scheme only because we trust the government. Now here I'm not speaking about the present government, past government, all this debate. No, the problem is that majority of the government schemes are structured in such a way that it will give you the notion that you're getting a good deal, but actually you are not if you do the analysis of that scheme. Let me pick one scheme which is called as Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana. Now I'm looking at my phone and I'm reading some data for you. So this scheme currently pays 7.6% yield. And if you make an investment of 10,000 rupees monthly for a period when your girl is 5 years old, and at the time of maturity, and this maturity will happen in 2042. So this has a holding period of 21 years. You would end up making 4,24,344 rupees. You will say that, okay, this scheme is wonderful because it is paying me 7.6% ROI. In a savings account, I'm getting 2 to 3%. In a fixed deposit, I'm getting 6%. But the problem here is the holding period, which is 21 years, which is super long. Now, if you're making an investment for 21 years for your next generation, you should at least be able to beat inflation. Here, despite holding the money and going into a lock-in period of 21 years, you are barely beating inflation. If you have such long time horizon, then trust the government, yes, but trust the economy more. Government is not personally liable for managing your investment, but government is somewhat responsible for managing the economy. A better approach would be that simply, if you're investing for the next generation, go and put that money in index fund. In 21 year of holding period, you are going to get crazy amount of money, at least the double of what is being made here. So I hope you get this point. Let's move on to the next one. Now, one of the key mistakes that we make in investment is that we work on borrowed conviction and we don't have our own investment system. For example, you'll meet some uncle in the park. The uncle will say, beta, ITC khareed lo. You'll go and buy ITC. The next day you hear someone talk about cryptos. You will go buy cryptos. Next day you will watch some ad that, hey, mutual fund is the best. So you will go and buy mutual funds. The problem with this approach is that, okay, on borrowed conviction, you will probably buy the asset, but you would not know when to exit the asset, and that becomes a big headache for you. So always hear the analysis, what people are giving. As per that, try to figure out what your investment system is and accordingly buy assets that you have faith on. Because if you don't know the entry point and exit point of assets, you are never going to make money in any of the instruments. The final mistake that we make is that we don't have a vision when it comes to our own finances. For example, we would not simplify finances for us and set a direction where we need to go. That all of us understand that one of our biggest expenditures in life is not the kids, it is the taxes that we pay. If you like that dialogue, do press the like button. We all understand that we need to optimize our taxes. One of the easiest way of optimizing taxes is to go and start businesses. Now, I'm not saying that you should leave your day job right away and jump into starting a business and start deriving GST advantages, all that stuff. Nothing. We can't do that. But at least we should have a vision, or at least set a vision that at some stage this is a possibility that we could explore. Let me give you a modern day example around. In order to register your company under GST, you need a turnover of 20 lakh rupees. Once you have that, you can start taking advantages of GST. For example, when I buy iPhone, and if the cost of iPhone is, let's say, hypothetically 1,18,000. Now, because I have GST registration, I will be able to get that phone at 1 lakh rupees, and I'll be able to claim that 18,000 at GST input. So this is an advantage for me. Now you will say that, hey, how does this apply for me? Because I have a day job. Okay, so these days many people are doing freelancing work along with their full-time job. Now, many of you might be making this type of revenue or might make this type of revenue subsequently in the future. Making notes of these type of points is going to help you out in terms of optimizing your tax. So do look into it very, very closely. Meanwhile, till the point you are getting to this stage, definitely explore all the options of optimizing your taxes, be it claiming deductions on your medical and health insurance, etc., etc. You should be exploring all the possibilities of optimizing the taxes. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, do subscribe to this channel and like this video. I will see you the next time.